Important reform effort lies not with future treaties but with existing treaties. Even if all newly negotiated investment treaties were improved, or governments refrained from negotiating ISDS provisions altogether, the existing stock of over 3,000 investment treaties continues to provide access to ISDS on the same terms as before. This journal offers insights and perspectives into the debate surrounding the reform of the ISDS regime, concerns, challenges, and opportunities. The journal is peer-reviewed and adheres to the highest quality of scholarly standards and credibility of information. Once again, I applaud the editorial board and the contributing authors, and I take this opportunity to congratulate all who have assisted in the publication of this journal. I wish the journal every success and growth as we look forward to subsequent journal series. On behalf of the NCI Board of Directors, our management, our staff, I thank you all for joining us this morning for this launch, and I invite you to engage with this current edition and to contribute to future series. It is now my distinct pleasure to officially launch the inaugural NCI Journal, dubbed the NCI ADR Journal, Volume 1, Number 1 of 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you have rightly mentioned, the journal is dubbed the NCIA ADR Journal. The Nairobi Center for International Arbitration, as you will be aware, is an arbitral institution anchored in Nairobi, whose main intention is to provide arbitral and alternative dispute resolution services from end to end. That means from the point of time of registration all the way to the point, in the instance of arbitration award, or in the case of mediation, settlement agreements. But beyond that, we also find ourselves in a space where we have determined that as an arbitral institution, there is a wider scope of ways in which we can contribute to the advancement, not only of arbitration, but also alternative dispute resolution. And so it is with that hindsight that the Center came up with the idea of developing a journal, as the Chair has rightly mentioned, to contribute to the knowledge base of alternative dispute resolution. Three things commend themselves for mention today. One of them is that with this journal, we intend to grow the body of knowledge. There is out there, as you shall see in this journal, tremendous talent which needs to be organized and then disseminated, the center here being a channel by which that knowledge, which is distributed across the globe, can then be available to you to read at the comfort of your desk or at the tap of your phone. The second thing is to demystify the practice of international arbitration and dispute resolution generally. When we mention international arbitration, many times we get to see that many people would think of dispute resolution just as arbitration. And in many ways, other means of dispute resolution are presented more or less like squabbling siblings of arbitration. So with this and other journals that will be following this one, we hope to demystify, one, the misconceptions, to clarify what international arbitration is, provide alternatives to you, the readers and the users, and eventually to show that there's a function or family of dispute resolution mechanisms that are available even on the international space. The third reason why we endeavored on this journey of developing a journal is to grow a thought leadership. One, to allow for cross-pollination of ideas, people from across the globe speaking to different topics, all of them giving different perspectives, their experiences across the various places where they practice. But then also particularly on the continent, we would want to see a growth in authorship by African writers, but also extend the readership, make it available to the African reader, and especially as we look forward towards the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where international arbitration and other forms of dispute resolution will be a key factor driver of the integration of the continent. So not limiting it to Africa, but of course we see the input it could have on developing authorship and readership in this area across the continent. Now, our able chair of the editorial team will be speaking to specifically this particular issue of the journal. So I allow her to make her comments.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. This particular journal comes at a very good time for the center, I believe, because as the center looks to enhance the knowledge and transfer all that knowledge within the continent and beyond, it covers a topic that has raised many questions on a lot of the African disputes that have been settled in international forums. As Jackie mentioned, the fairness and legitimacy of those processes have come under scrutiny, and it is for this reason that we're having the topics that are being covered in this journal. So for me to talk you through some of what those topics are, the articles that you will find in this journal that I hope will enrich your knowledge and perhaps even encourage questions surrounding how we deal with international and investor-state disputes will be triggered. In the first article that you will encounter, Alexandre de Gramont has addressed the topic of investment arbitration and environmental protection. We will all remember the case of Kotek Mining versus the Republic of Kenya, which raised quite a number of questions as to how investments are dealt with within the Republic. The other article that you will interact with in the journal is one by Ben Sanderson and Alice Adu Jamfi, which is Africa in the Vanguard, Africa's role in shaping the future of investor-state arbitration. Jacqueline Waihenya has authored an article on investor-state dispute settlement in Kenya in the wake of the global clarion call for reform. Also, we have two articles from Dr. Kariuki Mwigwa that cover the topics of Africa's role in the reform of international investment law and the investor-state dispute settlement system. The other article that he has authored is on negotiating dispute settlement terms in bilateral investment treaties and economic partnership agreements. We then have a further article by Moiruri Wanyoike, which is an exploration of the Sino-Kenya bilateral investment treaties with the focus on the urgent need for reform of the arbitration regime. Peter Mwangi Mureithi has authored an article on the upholding of state sovereignty under the ICSID Convention through the concept of consent. Paul Ngodho has presented an article on investment arbitration reforms, entitles it Naughty Questions and Options. Lastly, Tabitha Raore has addressed the question of reform of investment arbitration in the context of third-party funding. As you can see, these are very weighty topics that will prompt a conversation, hopefully at policy formulation level, and also the implementation of these awards or awards that may be rendered from these topics. With that, allow me to mention what the editorial committee is doing for the next journal, which we hope to be rolling out. We have considered the expansion of topics, but also providing a guide for those who may want to contribute. And we therefore would like to call for articles in these thematic areas. The role of AI and technology in arbitration and ADR mechanisms. In the wake of the COVID pandemic, I think we've all seen a rise and an uptick of the use of artificial intelligence and technology within the continent. The other topic that we'd be looking at is trends and opportunities in international commercial arbitration. Climate change is a topic we cannot ignore, flowing from the conversations at COP26, and we therefore are inviting articles on this topic insofar as these touch on arbitration. There are other hot topics that we would like to explore in the next journal, which are enforcement trends, current cases in international arbitration, and ADR processes. We want to look at the regional aspect from Africa, so COMESA, the EAC, and also the implementation of AFTCA. Lastly, There's evolving practice of arbitration in Africa. We invite you to please send your articles to us, and please use the email journal@ncia.or.ke. That email address is available on our website, and you will be able to access that on www.ncia.or.ke. The deadline for submission is the 28th of April, 2022. We hope to receive your articles, and thank you for your participation and collaboration.
Thank you very much, Madam Kananu. I have the privilege of sitting between the two chairs of the editorial committee. And let me use that advantage to perhaps pose a few questions to them. One especially to the chairperson of the board and previous chair of the editorial committee. Maybe just to give us a feel of what the journey was like, thinking through the journal and getting to where we are today, that we now are talking about an actual journal.
Thank you, Registrar. It has indeed been almost a 2-year journey to get to the point of an actual journal. And as the Registrar had said, he's given you the backdrop against which this journal was considered and conceptualized. And we started by thinking through how do we get a team together to run with the journal. So our editorial board is not just comprised of internal players. Indeed, some of the editorial board members that I mentioned, indeed the honorary members are all external to NCIA. So we have representatives from academia, we have representatives from the built environment, we have representation from the legal field. So all just to enrich the whole process of receiving articles, evaluating them, and through the office of the editor, which is internal, then guiding our contributing authors around our publication guidelines. And you will notice, and this is not just because I'm internal to NCIA, but the quality and the caliber of the articles is indeed commendable. Obviously, with time, we would want to see additional contributions from across the globe, but we are pleased that we have at least been able to represent 2 or 3 continents in this inaugural journal. It's interesting the direction in which the direction the journal took. We had indeed called for articles around investment arbitration, and this is why this inaugural journal focuses on that. A lot of back and forth, obviously, as we refined the guidelines, as we educated our contributing authors on the guidelines, we sensitized them on the requirements, just to ensure the quality and to ensure that we're not infringing on any copyright issues, for example. So inviting, and that to that extent, then our members from academia were particularly instrumental. So it is indeed so pleasing to me to see that we have come this far, and we have come this far in such a high-level way. And certainly the only way is up, as I see it, Registrar, and I see further to the editorial board chair's call today, I see increased contribution from across the globe. Obviously, we have quite some representation from Kenya this time round, but we will certainly look forward to receiving representation from across the globe, because we are an international center for dispute resolution, so we therefore invite perspectives from different countries, from different continents, and of course on the different topics that Kananu has raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe one more question. You have just mentioned we are a center for international arbitration, and our journal is titled Alternative Dispute Resolution. Perhaps a good reason why we didn't title it Arbitration Journal, but Alternative Dispute Resolution Journal.
Okay, thank you, Registrar, once again. Because of the point you raised, that our mandate at NCIA extends beyond arbitration. So yes, our name suggests that we are exclusive to international arbitration. However, our mandate is wider than that. We are indeed mandated to sensitize and create education and awareness around different types of dispute resolution. So the name indeed perhaps misleads, but we are committed to education, awareness, and discourse on matters alternative dispute resolution. So whether they fall within domestic or international arbitration, domestic or international mediation, adjudication, conciliation, traditional justice mechanisms that are now recognized in Kenya, certainly. So the broad scope, and I think these will all serve to enrich the journal as it progresses.
Thank you. Then maybe let me also ask the current chair of the editorial board. You made a call for the next journal, and you've mentioned a couple of topics that are likely to feature in the next series. This particular one seems to address one area of practice. What would be the reason why you think it would be good to broadly cover areas which not focusing only on one area, but expanding the area of coverage for the next journal? What is the energy behind that thought?
Thank you, Lawrence. This really is a response and a reaction to what we've been picking up from participants and players in this space, the need to address broader topics and cover them in a way that meets their need. So, for instance, as I mentioned with the COP26 that raised a number of policy considerations at international and therefore national levels, that has invited thought on the role of arbitration in climate change. Indeed, some arbitration centers and some jurisdictions are going so far as to wanting to adopt green technology in order to also play a role in how they mitigate against the risks of climate change. When we look at the topics of AI and technology, these are very poignant topics to cover at this time because online dispute resolution has become something that we're seeing a huge uptake in, and we would want to have an inclusive and elaborate discussion about how this impacts the role of arbitrators, party representatives, the safety and security of the systems that are used to dispense these awards, which ultimately parties are looking to implement. I expect that there'll be interesting questions coming up out of that on jurisdiction. If your arbitrator is sitting in one direction and the platform being used might be owned in a different jurisdiction, I think you'll have very many intriguing questions coming up out of this. So the aim really with opening up is to have as much discourse as possible on the various issues that affect the arbitration and ADR broadly. And perhaps I could add that, as a matter of fact, there had been some concern about the inclusion of mediation, for instance, into the journal by some of those who practice in ADR. So it is really responding to the players in the ADR space.
Well, thank you. For those of you who are tuned in, you can already feel the energy anticipating the next issue of the journal, and maybe a confirmation from the chair. Although we are speaking of the next journal, what is the frequency, regularity of the journals? Are we only going to see 2?
Thank you. We're looking at having this be an annual journal that is rolled out, and that frequency is one that we intend to maintain. So you are looking at seeing us more frequently, and perhaps good time for me to also mention, actually, CEO, that we are having an electronic version of this journal that can be accessed by those who are looking to form part of the readership. So we will have electronic versions in addition to the hard copy versions that we hold.
Thank you. As we transition to a small commercial break, let me just wind this session up with an African proverb that tells us that until the lions have their historians, tales of the hunt shall always glorify the hunter. We believe with this journal it is the moment for arbitration on the continent to tell its story, and not just tell its peculiar story, but integrate its story with a story that is international, global arbitration. And we hope we can continue to have a footprint in gathering the knowledge, disseminating it, and also growing a wealth of authorship and readership on the continent. And we invite you to join us on this journey.
So consider this journal officially launched, Volume 1, Number 1 of 2021. For those who may not have heard me, consider the journal officially launched, Volume 1, Number 1, 2021 of the NCI ADR Journal. Yay!
I'm going to then pop this champagne that I see is well placed on an early morning in Nairobi. Okay, I better not spill on me. Okay, should I shake it up and I'll just point it in your direction? Please do. Oh, I'm gonna get messy. Okay, let's see how this goes. Oh, this is gonna be bad.
Okay. Well done, Kanan. Very well done.
Good. You have to pour. Now, how do you help us? Non-alcohol. Oh, wow.
I'm told it's non-alcoholic, so we can still go back to work after.
In the morning. Good.
Okay, so cheers.
Cheers.
And here's to future journals of the NCI.
Cheers. Yum, yum.
So perhaps I can do the vote of thanks. I want to specifically thank our contributing authors once again, Alexandra Dekamo, Ben Sanderson and Alice Adu-Jamfi, Jacqueline Waihenya, Dr. Kiruki Mwigwa, Mwiruri Wanyoike, okay. Peter Mwangi Morevi, Paul Ngodho, and Tabitha Joy Raore. And just to say, this is a cross-section of practitioners from across the gender divide, across the practice divide in terms of age, so really pleasing to us at the center. I also acknowledge our honorary members of the editorial board, Hazran Maira, Engineer Frederick Alwatch, Brian Windy, Alim Visram. Thank you.
Cheers and have a good day.